Did you know there is a kind of Egyptian temple you were never supposed to see at all? Imagine drifting over the desert at night. No tourists, no lights, just dunes rolling like black waves under a thin strip of stars. The wind erases every footprint. From above, it looks empty, silent, dead. Then the ground falls away. Cut to an underground hall. Stone columns rise out of black, still water. Torches hiss against damp walls. The ceiling is low, the air heavy, and every sound folds back on itself in a deep, humming echo. No sunlight has ever touched this place. What if the most important temple in Egypt was never meant to stand under the open sky? Welcome back to the channel. Here, we explore the mysteries, history, and forgotten lore of ancient Egypt, slowly and calmly, so you can relax, unwind, and drift off while learning about one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history, from the pyramids and hidden chambers beneath the sands, to the gods, pharaohs, and ancient stories carved into temple walls along the Nile. If you enjoy relaxing history like this, consider subscribing and joining us for more journeys into the ancient world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's return to the sands of Egypt. For thousands of years, when people think of Egyptian temples, the same images appear. Karnak, with its forest of columns blazing in the sun. Luxor, lined with ram-headed sphinxes leading straight to the Nile. Philae, floating on its island like a stone ship. These are temples built to be seen, to be approached, to dazzle both the people and the gods. They follow rules, long processional ways, grand pylons, open courts where crowds could watch the rituals, sanctuaries aligned with the river, with the sunrise, with the great cycles of the heavens. Most of us grew up believing this is what a temple is supposed to be, but old legends tell a different story, because scattered across Egypt are places that break those rules completely. At Abydos, the Osirian lies sunken below ground level, half flooded, massive blocks arranged in a way that feels older and stranger than the bright temple beside it. At Saqqara, the Serapeum hides in twisting tunnels, housing colossal sarcophagi in chambers carved deep into the rock. At Dendera, certain crypts lie tucked behind thick walls, their ceilings low, their reliefs meant only for those who knew how to find them. Why build a sanctuary and then bury it? Why carve passages that lead away from the main axis, through tight, easily missed doorways, into rooms that were sealed almost as soon as they were finished? According to the stories, some temples were not for the crowds at all. They were for initiates. This is the contradiction at the heart of Egypt. Public temples blazing with incense and sunlight on the surface, and beneath, or behind, a second layer of architecture, hidden chambers, misaligned corridors, undecorated rooms where the rituals were whispered instead of displayed. What kind of knowledge needs that much secrecy? Imagine a temple that was never marked on stelae, never celebrated in festivals, never meant for ordinary worship, a mystery school in stone, where pharaohs and priests rehearsed the journey through the Duat while still alive, a place where the gates of the afterlife were mapped onto corridors, where darkness, silence, and echo became tools. But what really happened inside a temple built to be invisible? And most importantly, how do we even begin to detect a sanctuary that was designed not to be found? We'll find out together by following the faint architectural and textual clues that still remain, into the idea of a lost mystery temple hidden beneath the Egypt we think we know. What were they hiding? Framing the forbidden temple, imagine a sanctuary so carefully concealed that its builders never expected crowds, offerings, or daily prayers. A temple raised, not for the many, but for the few, or perhaps for no living congregation at all. Why would anyone do that? Here is where the mystery sharpens. Why would a civilization pour unimaginable labor into a sanctuary no ordinary worshipper would ever see? Why carve corridors that twist away from the main axis, chambers with no decoration, doors that open onto solid stone? Who were these spaces for? Were they mistakes in the plan, or were they messages written in architecture instead of ink? In the visible temples of Egypt, everything feels clear. A straight processional way, sunlit courtyards, reliefs of pharaohs and priests performing familiar rituals. But then, beneath or behind that order, something stranger appears. Blind corridors that go nowhere, false doors carved into walls, low tunnels that force the body to bow. Did you know some of these lower chambers are completely bare, as if the stone itself was the only text allowed to speak? Egyptian writings quietly echo this design. They speak of hidden chambers, sealed books, and mysteries of the Duat that are not to be seen, not to be heard by the uninitiated. The Amduat, the Book of the Hidden Chamber, describes the afterlife as a sequence of rooms and gates, each more secret than the last. It is as if the architecture and the texts are reflecting each other. Stone corridors on the surface, invisible corridors in the world of symbols. What if the walls were not just decoration, but gatekeepers? Imagine passing a series of doors where every threshold filters people out, the outer courts for the crowd, inner halls for priests, a sanctuary for pharaohs, and then, beyond that, a passage that bends away from the main axis, dropping into silence, darkness, and undecorated stone. Old legends tell a different story about such places. According to the stories, these were not just rooms, they were tests. Here, in this series on the mystery schools of Egypt, we follow a simple but daring idea. What we call temples might be only the visible half of a two-layered system. Public ritual above, private initiation below. On the surface, festivals, hymns, incense. Underneath, a hidden curriculum of death rehearsal, altered states, and direct encounters with the Duat. Somewhere in that two-layered network, there may have been a temple that functioned less like a house for a god and more like a spiritual machine. A device built of stone, sound, and darkness, designed to move consciousness the way a water wheel moves a river. What kind of knowledge would demand a machine like that? And most importantly, why hide it so completely that only hints remain? In this episode, we will trace that question step by step. We move from familiar, tourist-filled temples to the overlooked side chambers tucked behind them, from open-air courtyards to underground passages and sealed crypts, from inscriptions everyone can see to whispers of rituals that were never written down at all. We will stay close to the evidence. Misaligned shrines, buried sanctuaries, undecorated lower rooms, and texts that insist some teachings must never be public. But we will also walk up to the threshold of speculation, where archaeology brushes against mystery school practice. Each time, we will mark the line between what is known and what is only suggested. Because this is not just a story about old stones, it is an invitation. In this series on the mystery schools of Egypt, we treat every viewer as a modern initiate. By the end of our journey, when we stand before an Egyptian temple, we will not only see columns and carved walls, we will feel for the invisible half beneath our feet, the hidden plan, the secret chambers, the possible presence of a temple that was never meant to be found. So where do we begin looking for such a place? With the temples, we think we already understand, from tourist temples to invisible schools. We begin with the temples everyone knows, the postcard giants, Karnak, Luxor, Edfu. For thousands of years, these places have been presented as the public face of Egyptian religion, and on the surface, that picture makes perfect sense. According to Egyptology, a temple was the mansion of a god, a cosmic model in stone, where heaven, earth, and the underworld met on a single sacred axis. Here, pharaohs and priests performed daily rituals to wake the god, feed the god, clothe the god, and send the god to rest again. Festivals poured out into the streets, carrying statues on gilded boats so the people could see their invisible protectors. The temple was not hidden. It was the beating, visible heart of the city. Did you know these places were also economic engines? Temples owned fields, workshops, granaries, and herds. Scribes tracked offerings, taxes, and deliveries on long papyrus rolls. Within the walls, the state, the gods, and the people were bound together in a steady, cyclical rhythm. Every year, the same processions, the same hymns, the same carved scenes lit by the same rising sun. If we walk through a classic temple, the pattern is clear. We pass through colossal pylons into a bright open court. Columns rise like stone papyrus stalks. Further in, the light drops. Hypostyle halls thicken with shadow. At the far end lies the sanctuary, the darkest and most restricted room, where the god's statue rested in a shrine. The walls narrate everything: offerings presented, enemies defeated, myths reenacted. The whole layout is an invitation to process, to see, to reaffirm the world as it is. But old legends tell a different story beneath this official one. They speak of Egypt not only as a land of tombs and temples, but of houses of life and places of becoming. In these traditions, the temple is not just a theatre for worship, it is a school, a machine for changing consciousness. Look at the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, and the later book of Coming Forth by Day. On the surface, they read like guides for the dead, spelling out passwords, names and gates in the duat. But what really happened if these were also training manuals for the living? What kind of knowledge turns funerary spells into rehearsal scripts? Some scholars have suggested that priests recited these lines in dark side chambers, walking the soul's journey, step by step before death. In that light, certain rooms inside temple complexes stop looking like storage and start looking like stages. Narrow corridors become model underworld pathways. Low, echoing crypts become practice tombs, where initiates learn to face fear, silence, and the unknown. Most importantly, when we turn away from the grand, symmetrical axis and study the strangest corners, the misaligned halls, sunken courts, undecorated underground rooms, another pattern appears. Spaces that break the rules, chambers that seem almost deliberately forgettable. What if these are the architectural fingerprints of mystery schools, built for a handful of initiates rather than the crowd? According to the stories, some sanctuaries were sealed after specific rituals, effectively erased from public memory. So the real question becomes unsettling. If the temples we know were designed to be seen, what kind of temple was designed never to be found at all? And who was meant to walk its hidden halls? Who was allowed in? The gatekeepers of the hidden temple. If a temple was designed never to be found, then almost no one was meant to enter it. But who, exactly, stood at those hidden doors? To answer that, we have to remember how Egyptian temples worked in plain sight. On festival days, ordinary people could press into the outer courts, bringing offerings, watching the glittering processions. Deeper in, only priests moved through the pillared halls, tending the fires, reciting daily rituals. At the very heart, in the sanctuary, the god's image stood in a shrine that only the pharaoh and the highest clergy might see. Restriction was normal. Every doorway was a filter. But did you know there are hints that some thresholds were even more exclusive, leading not just to a god statue, but to training grounds for the afterlife? According to the stories, there was an inner circle even within this sacred hierarchy. Pharaohs, high priests of Osiris at Abydos, and the elite clergy of Ptah at Memphis formed a narrow band of people who might have been invited into truly hidden chambers. Texts mention servants of the secret, individuals sworn to silence, drilled for years in ritual purity, precise recitation, and symbolic thinking. These were not casual temple attendants. These were specialists in crossing gates. Most temples ran like organized schools. Scribes learnt to write in open courtyards, under the daylight, copying accounts and royal decrees. Children of officials practiced on broken shards of pottery, surrounded by the noise of daily life. But old legends tell a different story about the mystery training. If it existed, it did not happen in the sun. It would have unfolded in darkness and echoing corridors, in underground rooms where a single oil lamp carved trembling patterns on the walls. Education here was not of the hand, but of the soul. In these hidden schools, the goal was not a better job in the bureaucracy. It was nothing less than conscious passage through the realms of the dead. Initiates prepared to move awake through the Duat, the vast underworld of tunnels, lakes, and gates. They studied the books of the hidden chamber and the book of coming forth by day, not as poetry, but as maps. Most importantly, they trained to become an Osiris, to die, be torn apart by the journey, and return as an Ach, a shining, effective spirit. What kind of knowledge promises that? Now imagine this is not theory. Imagine you stand at the side of a massive temple wall. The processional way is far behind you, full of torches and music. Here, there is only stone and wind. A priest you do not know touches the masonry, and a narrow, unmarked doorway swings inward, revealing a passage of blackness. His voice is almost a breath. Beyond this point, he says, "Every word you speak will be weighed. Every step will be measured. Every breath will be heard by guardians who do not live in this world. If your heart trembles, the walls will know. If your thoughts stray, the gates will close. For thousands of years, others have turned back at this threshold. A few have gone on and never been the same. We'll find out together what might wait in that darkness. But first, one question hangs in the air, like a held breath. Would you step through? The scribe of secrets, ancient voices hinting at a hidden temple. Most people would stop at that doorway and turn back. But old legends tell a different story. They say some priests stepped through, armed not with torches, but with words. To meet them, we have to move forward in time. Centuries after the Great Pyramid was sealed, the age of the great stone mountains was fading, and a new kind of monument was rising along the Nile. Sprawling temple schools at Abydos, Thebes, and beyond, covered in scenes of the afterlife. In this world, a quiet figure appears, the temple scribe of the Book of the Hidden Chamber, what we now call the Amduat. Did you know this text was not meant for everyone? Its colophons whisper that it is a secret book, to be known only by the initiated. It was copied in the New Kingdom, on the walls of royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, far from the open courtyards where ordinary worshippers prayed. The scribe who shaped it was not just recording myths, he was mapping a journey. The Amduat divides the night into 12 hours. Each hour is a chamber, a zone, a test. In one, the solar bark glides through a cave crowded with serpents. In another, it passes silent fields where the justified dead stand waiting. Every hour has its own guardians, gatekeepers, and precise names that must be spoken. Lines of hieroglyphs run beneath the images like technical notes. What to say, where to stand, which secret to remember when the way is blocked. Read this way, the Amduat looks almost like architectural instructions. 12 segments, 12 thresholds, curving passages, hidden rooms, and repeating refrains about concealment. It is useful for one in the necropolis, the text says. Who knows it in his body on earth? What kind of knowledge is that? To know the underworld in your body while still alive. Here the walls of text begin to lean toward the walls of stone. If priests had an hour-by-hour map of the Duat, would it not be natural to carve it into space? Imagine a temple wing that does not follow the straight, open axis we expect, but bends and descends, a sequence of tight corridors, low ceilings, and gated doorways. At each turn, an initiate stops, recites a passage, and steps through, enacting the sun god's hidden journey before death ever comes. According to the stories, this kind of restricted knowledge was guarded in special scriptoria called the House of Life, mentioned in temple inscriptions. These were not public libraries. They were inner schools where only select priests handled texts marked with phrases like, "It is secret, not to be seen, not to be heard." When we match those warnings with undecorated underground rooms, blind passages, and false doors in certain complexes, a pattern begins to emerge. We do not have a papyrus labeled Mystery School Curriculum, but we do have titles for priests whose roles were limited to hidden rituals. We do have architectural oddities, buried chapels, misaligned corridors, and lower chambers that seem designed more for controlled experience than for display. Most importantly, we have texts like the Amduat, insisting that the journey through the afterlife can be rehearsed. So were some temples functioning as living diagrams of the underworld, where initiates walked the Amduat in darkness while chants vibrated through the stone. Were these the true temples that were never meant to be found, except by those who had already crossed them in the mind? In the next step of our journey, we'll follow the stones themselves to places where the ground opens, the axis breaks, and the architecture starts behaving like a secret script. The Osirian and the Serapeum, blueprints of a vanishing temple. So let's follow that secret script into the stone itself, because in Egypt, there are places where the architecture suddenly stops behaving like a public monument and starts acting like a rehearsal stage for the underworld. At Abydos, behind the elegant temple of Seti I, the ground drops away into something that feels wrong for a normal sanctuary. This is the Osirian, a sunken megalithic hall carved into a trench-like basin, partly below the water table. Massive, red granite pillars rise out of a flooded floor, their reflections shivering in dark water. Did you know its plan is misaligned with Seti's temple, as if the two belong to different blueprints, or even different ages? Most Egyptian temples follow a clear axis, a processional spine aimed at a holy focus. The Osirian twists that expectation. Its core is almost bare of the usual temple decoration. No crowded scenes of pharaohs offering incense to rows of gods. Instead, heavy blocks, stark walls, and later, a band of funerary texts wrapped around the outer corridor. It feels archaic, older than the temple in front of it, more like a stone memory than an annex. What kind of knowledge needs a hall like this, half submerged, echoing, hidden behind another shrine? Access would never have been easy. To reach the central platform, ancient visitors had to descend, step near water, and move among pillars that loom like a forest of stone. This is not the bright forecourt of daily offerings. It is a deliberate descent, and the dedication is telling. The Osirian is linked to Osiris, lord of the underworld and rebirth. According to the stories, Abydos was his burial place, the gateway where his dismembered body was reassembled. So was this sunken hall a physical script for dying, dissolving, and returning. Now shift north to Saqqara. On the desert plateau, a modest entrance in the rock leads not to a grand facade, but down into the Serapeum, a subterranean maze of corridors. The air grows cooler, the light narrows, the walls press in. Then, out of the gloom, colossal granite sarcophagi emerge, each carved for a sacred Apis bull, each weighing dozens of tons, resting in side chambers like sleeping thunder. Here again, the pattern appears. The Serapeum was never meant for crowds. The corridors are long and claustrophobic, the turns controlled, the decorations sparse. A few inscriptions, some guardians at the gates, but mostly silence and mass. Every step feels like a guided journey into the earth, a ritual of passing through darkness to stand before impossible weight. For thousands of years, these places puzzled visitors. They are monumental in scale, but intimate in access. Their spaces seem tuned for a handful of priests and initiates, not for festivals. Old legends tell a different story than simple burial vaults. They speak of hidden schools, of rituals carried out away from the sun. But what really happened in these chambers Were the Osirian and the Serapeum just oddities, or surviving wings of a larger tradition of underground sanctuaries? Temples where the main ritual was movement itself, a choreographed journey through an engineered underworld. Most importantly, if these are only fragments, where is the master plan, the temple that ties them all together, and was never meant to be found on the surface at all? Satellites, voids, and false doors, modern clues in ancient stone. To find that master plan, we have to look from above and deep inside the stone itself. Did you know that some of the most important discoveries in Egypt now begin not with a shovel, but with a satellite? From orbit, subtle changes in color and temperature reveal buried walls, forgotten causeways, and strange geometric shadows under the sand. On the ground, archaeologists roll out ground-penetrating radar, sending pulses into the earth. Even the monuments themselves are scanned with muons, cosmic particles that slip through stone and sketch hidden shapes we cannot see. These tools have already changed the story. In the Great Pyramid, muon tomography revealed an unexplained cavity above the Grand Gallery, a space as long as a jetliner, sealed and silent for thousands of years. No obvious entrance, no clear function, just a hidden volume floating in the masonry, like a thought left unspoken. Radar surveys along the Nile have mapped voids beneath temple courtyards and platforms, hinting at buried chambers and galleries that do not match the visible floor plan. And then there are the tunnels. Under certain temples, scans show passageways that cut across the main axis or dive beneath known rooms, only to end abruptly in solid rock. No doors, no decorated entrances. It is as if parts of the temple were designed in 3 dimensions, a vertical labyrinth of ramps, shafts, and pockets. What kind of knowledge required a building that behaves more like a maze than a house for the gods? On the surface, the stones whisper the same mystery, false doors carved into flat walls, framed like real doorways, but opening onto nothing. To the Egyptians, these were portals where spirits passed between worlds. Nearby, small side chambers with curved ceilings act like acoustic amplifiers. A single chant from a priest can bloom into a chorus of echoes, surrounding the listener in invisible voices. Narrow light shafts pierce thick masonry so that on one specific day, for only a few minutes, a single beam illuminates a niche, a statue, or a name. Most of us grew up thinking these were just symbols, clever religious art, but old legends tell a different story. Imagine walking through a temple where doors do not open, voices come from nowhere, and light appears exactly when the ritual demands it. This is not just decoration, it is training, a school for the senses. According to the stories, initiates in these mystery schools learn to cross thresholds between seen and unseen, just as the soul must pass the gates of the Duat in the afterlife. The architecture itself became the first initiation, teaching how to trust what cannot be seen, how to remain calm when space behaves strangely, how to follow a path that bends through darkness. Mainstream archaeologists often describe these features as symbolic or practical. Ventilation, alignment, pure theology. But when we place the hidden voids, misaligned tunnels, false doors, acoustic chambers, and timed light shafts side by side, a pattern begins to emerge. It looks less like random anomalies and more like fragments of a single blueprint, a temple of initiation scattered across Egypt. But what really happened when someone was led into those secret chambers and the doors behind them closed? How far did these rituals go in rehearsing death itself? We'll find out together in the next part of our journey. Why hide a temple from history? Those doors close, the echo fades, and a stranger question appears. It's one thing to hide a single chamber from casual visitors. Temples all over Egypt have side rooms, secret niches, and locked shrines. But imagine designing an entire layer of architecture, corridors, stairways, whole suites of rooms, knowing that almost no one would ever walk there again. Why pour stone, labor, and time into a sanctuary that vanishes from history the moment it's sealed? Did you know some Egyptian sanctuaries were literally buried on purpose? After a cycle of rituals ended, priests performed closing ceremonies, filled chambers with sand or rubble, and erased entrances from view. To the public, the temple ended at the outer courts. Beyond that, nothing. But old legends tell a different story, of inner schools, hidden beneath the visible temples, where pharaohs and initiates walked a path no ordinary worshipper would ever see. We can try the practical explanations first. Maybe this was about political control of knowledge, keeping powerful rituals in the hands of a few priests. Maybe it was fear of tomb robbers or the need to protect sacred objects. Those motives make sense when we imagine gold, statues, and treasure locked away. But then we meet something stranger. Undecorated, almost empty spaces. Long, low tunnels under Saqqara. Bare chambers beneath temple floors. Rooms with no carved scenes, no offering tables, no obvious use, yet demanding massive resources to build. If there was nothing to steal, why hide them so carefully? What did they learn in there? According to the stories, initiates took oaths of silence. Certain rituals were never written down, only spoken in the dark. Some texts even warn that revealing them to the unprepared would bring disaster. What could be so powerful, so dangerous, or so easily misunderstood that it required stone labyrinths, sealed doors, and generations of secrecy to contain it? What did they learn in there? Maybe the missing treasure was not gold at all, but a map. For thousands of years, Egyptian priests copied texts like the Amduat, the Book of the Hidden Chamber, describing the sun god's journey through 12 regions of the night. These were not just stories, they read like instructions. Gates, passwords, guardians, rivers of fire, hidden boats. Now imagine those texts not just painted on tomb walls, but enacted in stone. Each corridor a segment of the night, each turn a gate, each chamber a trial in the invisible landscape of the afterlife. What kind of knowledge could such a temple encode? A tested method for guiding consciousness through death and back. A way to rehearse the journey of the soul while still alive. Most importantly, to understand why a temple might be built to be invisible, we have to step into the Egyptian mind itself and walk the realm they believed awaited every soul after death. The Duat. That is where we're going next. The Duat, Egypt's other world as a labyrinth of trials. To the Egyptians, the great mystery was never how life ends. It was what waits when the last breath leaves the body. Did you know they did not imagine a vague, cloudy heaven, but a mapped, structured realm beneath and beyond this world? with rules as strict as any temple law. They called it the Duat, not just the underworld, but a vast hidden landscape where every soul was expected to travel. Death was not an end, it was a gate into this other world. According to the stories, the moment a person died, their mobile soul, slipped free and began a journey through darkness toward a place of tests, judgments, and, for the worthy, rebirth alongside the sun or union with Osiris. This duat was not one simple corridor, it was a labyrinth. Imagine caverns that echo like stone chambers deep under Saqqara, black rivers winding past islands of flame, lakes of fire that glow without smoke, and ceilings painted not with pigment, but with living stars. Serpents coil along the walls, some crowned with knives, others breathing fire. Hybrid guardians with human bodies and animal heads stand at narrow gates, while silent divine judges sit behind scales, waiting for hearts to be weighed. For thousands of years, priests copied and expanded the maps of this realm. One of the most important was the Amduat, the Book of the Hidden Chamber. It describes the night journey of the sun god Ra through the Duat, divided into 12 sections, 12 hours of the night. Each hour is a district with its own gate, its own guardians, its own passwords. Ra sails in a sacred boat, gliding through pitch-black tunnels, past pits where the dismembered enemies of the sun are bound and burned so they can never threaten the cosmos again. In some scenes, the boat passes walls made entirely of coiled serpents, each snake named, each one a living spell. In others, we see fields of reeds shimmering in a soft pre-dawn light, a peaceful mirror of Egypt's own Nile Valley. And at the hidden center lies the corpse of Osiris, stretched out on a funerary bed, wrapped like a mummy. Around him, gods and spirits gather to perform rituals of awakening, turning death itself into a generator of new light. This may sound chaotic, but old legends tell a different story. The Duat was obsessively organized. Every gate has a title. Every guardian demands a precise phrase. Every stretch of river, every cavern, every lake of fire comes with specific dangers and specific rewards. Miss a name, fail a question, and the soul risks annihilation or endless wandering. Speak correctly, and the way opens. What kind of knowledge thrives in a world like this? Technical knowledge, memorized sequences, rituals rehearsed until they become instinct. Most importantly, a curriculum that can be practiced in life. The Duat, with its 12 sections and countless challenges, was a cosmic syllabus. And if the afterlife was an exam, then the hidden temples and underground schools had one purpose: to train the living to pass it. But what really happened inside those dark training halls, when the lights were extinguished and the chants began, we'll find out together in the next part of our journey. Maps for the dead, manuals for the living. When the chants faded and the torches died, the training did not stop. It simply moved onto the walls, the coffins, and the rolls of papyrus that waited like silent instructors in the dark. Did you know that for thousands of years, Egyptian tombs were lined not just with art, but with what were essentially manuals for the dead? The earliest were the pyramid texts, carved deep inside royal chambers. Later came the coffin texts, written on the very boxes that held the bodies of nobles and priests. Eventually, these teachings unfolded into the Book of the Dead, brushed in black and red ink onto papyri placed beside the mummy like a travel guide for the soul. These were not random prayers. They were precise scripts, spells for knowing the names of the gatekeepers at each threshold, spells to keep the heart from being devoured by Amit during judgment, spells to transform into a falcon, a lotus, a serpent of fire, each one a different survival strategy for a different region of the Duat. The soul was expected to move through scenes, approaching a gate, facing a guardian, speaking the exact name, and passing through. But here is the mystery most people miss. Many of these spells begin with the same instruction, to be recited. Some go even further, saying they should be known by heart by the one who uses them. That line changes everything. It tells us the ideal was not a confused spirit trying to read from the walls in the dark. The ideal was a trained initiate who had already internalized the script long before the final journey began. So imagine these texts the way a pilot treats a simulator manual, or how a deep diver studies a decompression chart. You do not wait until the engine fails or the ocean crushes in to open the book. You rehearse in safety. You drill the steps. You walk through every scenario until the responses are automatic. According to the stories, Egyptian priests and initiates did something similar, using temple spaces as ritual simulators of the Duat. A spell about naming gatekeepers could become a living scene, a dark corridor, statues looming on either side, a hidden priest challenging the initiate with questions from the text. The weighing of the heart could be dramatized before a painted scale, with flickering lamps casting Mart's feather in trembling light. Transforming into a falcon or a lotus might be accompanied by specific postures, incense and resonant tones that made the body feel light or dissolved. Old legends tell a different story about these funerary books. They were not only maps for the dead, they were manuals for the living. Tombs preserved the curriculum, but temples were the classrooms. Most importantly, the most secret lessons may have been taught not in the open courtyards, but in underground or sealed chambers where only initiates could enter. So where were these hidden schools of the afterlife actually located? And what kind of knowledge was powerful enough to be buried in a temple never meant to be found? Training for death in the dark, inside the initiation chambers. Imagine walking into a temple that was never meant for crowds at all. No incense smoke, no processions, no sunlight on painted walls. Only darkness, stone, and a handful of people preparing to rehearse their own death. Did you know that, according to the stories, the Egyptians did not always wait for the final breath to meet the Duat? For thousands of years, pharaohs, high priests, and select initiates of the mystery schools may have stepped into the underworld while still alive, not by accident, under strict, controlled rituals. The body stayed in the temple, the consciousness went elsewhere. Picture a small group slipping through a side door long after the public rituals have ended. Sand muffled under their feet, torches held low. At the center is the initiate, wrapped in white linen, breathing fast. Around them move masked priests embodying hidden gods, Anubis with the jackal face, Thoth with the ibis beak, a silent Horus falcon watching from the shadows. A lector priest clutches a worn scroll, lines from the Amduat, and the book of coming forth by day, ready on his tongue. Behind them, a drummer waits, hand poised, heartbeat and gateway in one. They reach a narrow stair cut straight into the bedrock. The air cools, the ceiling drops so low the initiate must bow, as if already entering a tomb. With each step, the temple above fades. No more open courtyards, only hidden chambers that most of the city will never know exist. At the bottom, a low, undecorated room opens before them. No bright scenes of harvest or festivals. Bare stone. A false door carved into the far wall, its edges catching a single shaft of lamplight or moonlight from a slit overhead. The torches are extinguished, one by one. Darkness presses in. The drum begins, slow and steady, guiding breath. In that moment, the architecture itself becomes a script. Then the voices start. Chants echo from unseen corners, bouncing off sudden turns and tight angles in the corridor behind. Names of fearsome guardians fill the dark. Gate of flames, gate of knives, gate of the hidden face. The initiate is led forward until the false door looms inches away, invisible but felt. A masked priest whispers from the dark, "Name the gate, name the guardian, speak the words that open the way." This is memorization turned into life or death theatre. The initiate recites from memory, lines drilled in the daylight halls above, passages from the Amduat, spells from the Book of the Dead. Here, a mistake does not bring physical death, but it stops the journey. The drum halts, the silence condemns. The ritual must begin again another night. Old legends tell a different story about these spaces. Some underground corridors twist without reason, bending sharply, forcing the body to turn and turn again. Low ceilings make every breath conscious. Some chambers were engineered to vibrate at certain tones, so a single chant from the lector priest could make the walls hum like an invisible presence. But what really happened is that the temple itself became a map of the duat. Sudden turns mimicked the disorienting paths between underworld gates. False doors stood in for thresholds between worlds. Acoustic tricks made distant voices sound like beings calling from the next chamber of existence. Most importantly, a guiding priest always remained just close enough, a hand on the shoulder, a whispered name, to pull the initiate back up the stair, out of the darkness and into the first pale light of dawn. So were these rituals only symbolic dramas, or did the initiates truly believe they were walking between worlds? And if the temple could train a living person to die well, what else could it train a human mind to do? We'll find out together when we follow the trail of sound itself into the most secret resonance chambers of Egypt's hidden schools. Through 12 gates, a temple built as a cosmic spine. To follow that trail, we have to look at something easy to miss: the number 12. Did you know the Egyptians divided the underworld night into 12 precise hours, 12 regions, 12 gates? Texts like the Amduat read, on the surface, like a cosmic travel guide. Hour by hour, gate by gate, the sun god sails through the duat. But what if those weren't just poetic chapters? What if they were blueprints for an actual sequence of hidden chambers beneath a temple? According to the stories, each hour of the night had its own landscape and its own guardians. At every gate, a pattern repeats like a ritual code. Encounter, response, reward. A soul or an initiate meets a fearsome being or a whole group of beings. They demand names, titles, secret formulas. Speak correctly, and the gate opens. Fail, and the journey ends. It is almost like levels in a game, but with the afterlife itself at stake. Imagine walking a forbidden level of a temple where that pattern has been built into stone. 12 chambers, each slightly deeper, each slightly stranger. In one, the air feels close and heavy, the ceiling low, the only light a single oil flame that throws giant, shifting shadows. In another, the walls are covered in dense hieroglyphs, every surface shouting names of gods and serpents. Then, suddenly, a room with no inscriptions at all, just raw rock and echoing silence, as if the knowledge there was never meant to be written. This is architectural mirroring. Different lighting from narrow shafts overhead or hidden lamps. Different iconography from crowded scenes of the sunboat to stark, undecorated stone. Different acoustics from whispering corridors to booming resonance chambers. Each space could be tuned to evoke the specific challenges of that hour of the duat: suffocating darkness, blinding fire, dismemberment, reassembly, the weighing of the heart. In such a system, there is no room for improvisation. The priests of these mystery schools, trained until the responses were automatic, the initiate would step into a chamber, face a carved guardian or a masked priest, and declare, "I know you. I know your name." Every word, every gesture, every breath had to match the script. Like a pilot's emergency checklist, the ritual sequence had to be flawless under pressure, when fear was at its peak. But what really happened to these 12-fold temples? Our surviving texts often break off mid-scene. Our excavations reveal partial corridors, isolated crypts, strange misaligned rooms that lead nowhere. Most of us grew up believing these were unfinished projects or random storage spaces. Yet old legends tell a different story. They hint at a continuous underworld temple, a kind of cosmic spine of 12 gates buried beneath the visible sanctuary. If that spine once existed, where did it go? Was it dismantled, sealed, or simply never meant to be found by ordinary worshippers at all? And most importantly, could traces of it still be hiding beneath the sand, waiting for someone who remembers the old passwords? In the next part, we'll follow those traces into the darkest, most secret chambers the archaeologists almost walked past. Echoes in other mysteries, Greece, Eleusis, and beyond. Before we follow those traces into the sand, let's do something strange. Let's leave Egypt entirely. In a single step, the Nile fades. The pyramids dissolve. We are standing instead on a sacred road in ancient Greece, walking toward a complex of halls and underground chambers at a place called Eleusis. For thousands of years, this sanctuary drew pilgrims from across the Greek world, not to watch public sacrifices, to vanish for one night into a secret. Did you know the core of the Eleusinian mysteries was never written down in full? Ancient authors described the outer shell, but when they reached the inner rites, their words stopped. They only hinted. Initiates were led into darkness, shown things said, things done, things revealed, and then sworn on pain of death to silence. No one was allowed to describe what really happened when the doors closed. Imagine walking into that main hall. Torches are extinguished. A crowd stands in total blackness. Then, suddenly, a blaze of light, a sacred object lifted high, a voice proclaiming a promise of life beyond death. Old legends tell a different story from the calm marble ruins we see today. They speak of staged encounters with symbols of death and rebirth, of a ritual journey that changed how a person met the afterlife itself. Now listen to the structure beneath the myth. No public description of the central rites. A carefully controlled environment of darkness and sudden light. Priests guiding candidates through a sequence of chambers. A final revelation that transforms their relationship to death. Does that pattern sound familiar? It echoes Egypt. It echoes the hidden rooms behind temple walls, the undecorated corridors, the secret rituals whispered only to those who had passed certain gates of training. Different gods, different myths, but the same architectural logic. Build a space where the soul can rehearse its journey while the body still breathes. And Eleusis was not alone. Across the Roman world, the cult of Mithras met in artificial caves and underground shrines, carving images of a god slaying a cosmic bull beneath starry ceilings. In Anatolia, archaeologists have found rock-cut initiation chambers and subterranean corridors that forced initiates to crawl, bend, and re-emerge into light. Later esoteric schools in late antiquity and beyond reused the same template: symbolic journeys, graded degrees, secret passwords, and carefully staged thresholds. According to the stories, these were not random basements. They were machines for transformation. So when we return to Egypt now, we return with a wider lens. If Greece, Rome, Anatolia, and later mystery schools all built hidden spaces to enact ritual death and rebirth, is it really so strange to imagine Egyptian priests doing the same? What kind of knowledge would demand a temple that hides its own purpose? Most importantly, what if the most extreme Egyptian version, a sanctuary designed from the ground up as an underworld training ground, never meant for public worship, has not yet been recognized? Could it be mislabeled as a storage annex, buried under later construction, or hiding in plain sight beneath a monument we think we already understand? We'll find out together as we descend back into Egypt's stone, following the clues toward a temple that was never meant to be found, reading the ruins differently. Are we standing on the roof? So now, with this new lens, we go back. We stand again at Abydos, at the Osirian, staring down into that flooded stone box of a monument. For thousands of years, visitors have been told it is a cenotaph, a symbolic tomb for Osiris. But what really happened if this was only the basement of something larger? Imagine the sandy plateau around it, not as empty ground, but as the collapsed upper floors of a mystery school, while the real ritual journey continued in passages now drowned by groundwater, unreachable, waiting. At Dendera, most of us walk along the decorated roof chapels, reading zodiac ceilings and bright reliefs of pharaohs and priests. Guides point to the crypts below as storage for cult statues and ritual objects. Old legends tell a different story. Did you know some of those crypts are undecorated, their walls left strangely bare, as if the only images allowed there were the ones projected by the initiate's inner vision? A blank canvas in stone, where the eyes close and the real temple lights up behind the forehead. Edfu, with its massive pylons and perfect axis, looks complete, finished. But when we walk its hyperstyle halls, what if we are walking on the roof? Beneath the paving, there may be misaligned sub-chambers, following not the east-west line we see, but hidden celestial paths that echo the Duat's twisting river. According to the stories, the underworld does not run straight. Why should the training ground beneath our feet obey the surface plan at all? Saqqara pushes this question even further. We know of the Serapeum, the step pyramid's labyrinth, the deep shafts cut into bedrock. Ground-penetrating radar has shown anomalies under the sands here, voids and angles that do not match known corridors. Yet many of these possible chambers remain untouched, blocked by flooding, by the risk of collapse, or by modern cemeteries and villages above. Most importantly, there are political and ethical limits. How far do we cut into a sacred landscape just to satisfy curiosity? Across Egypt, there are sealed doorways bricked up in antiquity, false doors that may once have opened into active initiation routes, and entire substructures that modern teams can see on scans but cannot safely enter. Some crypts with no decoration may have been reserved for spoken rituals only. Some crooked side rooms might align with particular stars or with one of the 12 gates of the night. So here is the teasing possibility. Somewhere under the sand, or directly beneath the polished flagstones where tourists line up for photos, there may still lie a nearly intact sequence of 12 hidden chambers, each tuned to a different hour of darkness, a temple of the night, preserved by accident and by design, waiting for the moment when our questions, our technology, and our respect finally align. If that place still exists, how would we recognize it, and what kind of knowledge would it dare to show us first? What the hidden temple still teaches. So if a temple of the night still waits under the sand, what is it really waiting for? Our scanners and satellites, or something inside us that the ancient priests would have recognized immediately? We have followed a long arc to reach this question, from the huge, sunlit temples where pharaohs processed in gold and incense, to the hidden schools buried beneath them, from public rituals carved on every wall, to secret training whispered in undecorated chambers, from the painted maps of the Duat to the idea of an entire temple built as a living underworld. 12 gates, 12 hours, 12 trials, never meant for casual eyes at all. Did you know that along this journey, a pattern has quietly emerged? Again and again, the evidence points to a civilization obsessed not only with preserving bodies, but with training consciousness. The mummified form, the aligned pyramids, the sealed corridors, the cryptic texts. Together they look less like a cemetery and more like a vast, multi-level school for meeting the unknown. Imagine an initiate descending into one of those hidden chambers. No sunlight, thick silence, the air heavy with resin and stone. Above, the city lives its ordinary day. Below, a single human being rehearses death, reciting the gates of the Duat, facing the names of their own fears. According to the stories, this was not theatre. The underworld was real, the dangers were real, and the failure of the soul was a risk that echoed for thousands of years. But what really happened in that darkness? On one level, the initiate learned passwords, gestures, precise rituals. On another, something deeper was being trained. the ability to stay awake in terror, to move through inner chaos without collapsing. Most importantly, to discover that consciousness could travel, witness, and return. Seen this way, the temple that was never meant to be found becomes both a method and a metaphor. It is any space where you voluntarily walk off the bright main axis of life, step through a narrow door, and let the familiar world fall away. A therapy room where old memories rise like guardians at the gate. A silent retreat where time stretches and bends. A night alone in the wilderness when every sound becomes a question. Old legends tell a different story about temples, that the real sanctuary is not a building, but a carefully prepared state of mind. If that is true, then each of us already carries a hidden complex within. Where are your sealed chambers? The grief never opened. The fear of aging and death avoided with distraction. The questions about meaning kept behind a false door of busyness and noise. What would happen if, like an ancient initiate, you chose to enter those inner corridors with guidance and intention, not to conquer them, but to learn their language, to let the book of the hidden chamber be written in your own experience? We'll find out together, because the next step is to ask, if the temple is within, what does real initiation look like in a world of screens, speed, and almost no silence? Standing at the gate, closing the circle, and next steps. We'll find out together, but to close this chapter, step back with the camera for a moment. Imagine the desert at night again. The same sky, the same cold air, the same endless sand. But now, when you look out across that darkness, you can almost feel an invisible grid beneath your feet, a web of tunnels and chambers, misaligned corridors, and sealed doorways. A hidden temple humming below, its rituals long finished, its songs still echoing in stone. Did you know some Egyptian sanctuaries were literally buried after a final rite, erased from public memory on purpose? From above, there is only sand and silence. Below, there might be undecorated rooms, false doors that open only in the imagination, acoustic chambers tuned for a single chant. According to the stories, those were not places for crowds. They were built for a handful of initiates to rehearse the afterlife in total secrecy. But what really happened in a temple that was never meant to be found? We may never prove there was one perfect, ultimate mystery school hidden under the desert. Archaeology moves slowly, and the sand keeps its own counsel. Yet the convergence is hard to ignore. Texts about hidden chambers, strange underground galleries at Saqqara, voids inside pyramids, and parallel traditions of secret schools from Greece to India. Together, they make the mystery school reading both compelling and deeply humbling. Because in this episode, we have already walked the first gates. We learned to look at temples as layered, like bodies with bones, nerves, and a quiet inner heart. We listened to silence as if it were another inscription. We paid attention to what is missing from the record: the blank walls, the uncarved corridors, the rituals that were spoken but never written. Most importantly, we treated absence as a clue, not a dead end. Old legends tell a different story than the guidebooks. They suggest that real initiation was never about public spectacle, but about a private journey through fear, darkness, and the unknown. For thousands of years, pharaohs and priests may have descended into these hidden schools to practice dying before death, to test their hearts against Ma'at's feather while still breathing. So where does the journey go from here? In the next episode of this Mystery Schools of Egypt series, we will follow another thread through the labyrinth. We might step into the weighing of the heart ritual itself, or into the strange power of sound, the chants that shook temple walls, and perhaps the human nervous system. We'll take the same approach, hard evidence in one hand, mythic imagination in the other. Until then, try a simple practice. The next time you see a photo of an Egyptian temple or stand inside any old building, pause and ask, what am I not seeing? What might be beneath this floor, behind this wall, under this layer of history? Because the greatest temples, like the deepest parts of ourselves, are often the ones that were never meant to be found easily. And if some of them are still waiting under the sand or inside us, what will they reveal when the next gate finally opens?